So let's go through. There's 5 scientific discoveries about heaven, or 5 things that Jesus showed a scientist about how the physics of heaven works. I mean, these weren't peer-reviewed. They didn't do experiments, but this is Emanuel Swedenborg coming back and saying, not just, I went to the afterlife and here's what I saw, but this is E = mc squared level, permanent truths about the nature of the spiritual world.
Because those first 5, maybe you didn't have to be a scientist to pick up on those. I mean, you have to be interested in truth for its own sake. But he also goes to some interesting places here.
This is how heaven works. This is how the afterlife works, in case you wanted to know. 1, there are in the spiritual world, in the afterlife, there's a stratified atmosphere. So there are different layers of what he calls atmospheres that you have to be acclimated to in order to go to different parts of the afterlife. This is what he says. An abundance of experience in the spiritual world has shown me that there are several atmospheres distinguished from each other by level. One kind of experience was especially convincing, namely that angels of lower heavens cannot breathe in the realm of higher angels. They seem to labor for breath, like creatures taken out of the air into the ether, or like creatures taken out of water into the air. Then, too, the spirits below heaven look as though they were in a cloud.
And so Jesus didn't just sort of reveal this to him back at the beginning. He says an abundance of experience. So it's interesting to think about Swedenborg kind of with his clipboard and his lab coat, just, seems different here. So what's going on here? And he's checking it all out.
Yeah.
And figure out, this is so different that some people can't even breathe in these different environments. So that I gather there are actually different atmospheres, which is, I mean, who says this kind of thing?
And it has to do with the state of what's going on inside you. So that goes back to why doesn't God just let everyone into the highest heaven right now? I mean, he loves everyone, right? Well, it's just like saying to your Sherpa, you love me, let me walk up to the top of Mount Everest right now. Let's do it. No, you got to train. You got to train, you got to ascend slowly. Or to your dive instructor, I want to go back up to the surface. You love me, just let me go up to the surface right now. You're going to get the bends.
Yeah.
The heaven is like that as well. That there are levels of love and wisdom which are just as important and as intense as the difference in atmospheric gases here.
It's amazing to think that our own spirits right now are able to, I've never thought about it before, but they're able to breathe, like they breathe in different ways. There's different spiritual substances that they breathe, that they're fed by in that way on those different levels.
But don't you sometimes say about like this person's on another level. Their thinking is on another level.
That's true.
It might just be literally true.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 2, there are in the spiritual world this repeating pattern that follows the pattern of the human body. So things there tend to have a lot of disparate elements that work together like what you find in the human body. This is what he said. This is from Secrets of Heaven 3624. Let me now relate and describe some amazing things that so far as I am aware have never been known to anyone or even entered anyone's head. The whole of heaven has been formed to correspond with the Lord and his divine humanity. So Jesus has showed Swedenborg that heaven is an image, literally the body of Christ that's the form, the schematic form that heaven takes. It's like a person. The whole of heaven has been formed to correspond with the Lord and his divine humanity. Human beings have been formed to correspond in absolutely every particular with heaven and through heaven with the Lord. So that's why our bodies are like they are. This is a huge mystery that needs to be revealed at this time and will be treated of here and at the ends of the following chapters. That explains why it was said several times in preceding sections describing heaven and communities of angels that they belonged to some region of the body, like that of the head, chest, abdomen, or some part of our organ there. The reason is the above-mentioned correspondence.
I have a silly image in mind about this. If you go to London, which I know you've done, and you ride the tube, mind the gap, and everywhere you go, there's a map of the whole underground, because you need to know, oh, do I get on this line or that line?
Yep.
And there is a map for heaven. And not only Swedenborg, but it seems like everybody up there, they know, oh, I'm part of the kidney, or I'm part of this ligament that attaches this to this. And they all know that map. They all sort of navigate by that map. And yet down here, does anybody know that heaven has that shape, or how specific it is? It's not just sort of generalized, like, yeah, there's a head and a torso and no, it's gets down to minute details.
Everything that happens within the human body. And as we learn more and more of that, as we develop these microscopes that can go in, the way that RNA is involved in replication and protein synthesis or whatever it does, there's something going on in heaven and inside your heart and mind that corresponds to that. And there's something in God that is the sort of the real version of that little process we see here. You're walking around inside the map.
Yes, that's
you're wearing the map.
You're wearing the form of heaven. Yeah, you're wearing the map. It's like that show Prison Break, wasn't it, where the guy had the form of the prison tattooed on his, or whatever it was. He had these amazing tattoos, and it would show him how the whole prison went for his escape.
Hey,
we're all wearing this map of heaven.
Yeah, you already got that tattoo. It's just you.
Yeah.
So the form recurs across everything. Number 3, scientific fact number 3 about heaven.
This is so exciting.
People's environments reflect their state of mind. This is how Swedenborg describes it, Heaven and Hell 156. As the states of the inner levels of angels' love and wisdom change, so too do the states of the various things that surround them and are visible to their eyes. For the things that surround angels are given their appearance according to the things that are within them.
Again, I don't know if this took him some observation to realize, but it's sort of like, hey, did your mood just change? Because I noticed this painting is different than it was a moment ago.
That's right. That's something that is reflected in you might not notice it the first time you went up and saw heaven. If you have a near-death experience or something, you might see amazing things, but not realize that in the physical world, there's an outside in. So the way that a room looks and feels is because of how you laid those materials down, and then that affects your state of mind. Spiritual world, it's the opposite. There's inside out. So how you're feeling and what you think and what you know, that actually is a sculpting force that creates the house around you. He says that as you change and your wisdom grows and develops, new rooms appear, new decorations, that all this stuff is reflecting what's in you.
The furnishings, the cutlery, also clouds outside, the way the sky looks, animals, birds that you see, trees, plants in the garden, all of it. If you're given that reflection, it's a strange concept, but kind of amazing to think that you could see something about the state that you're in, because it's actually the fact that bird just flew by. That has something to do with what's going on in you as well.
And some people in the afterlife that Swedenborg talks to seem very clued into that. There's a time when he's asking I think it's a couple, about sort of the secrets of how to have a happy spiritual marriage. And they go look out their window and they see a white bird sitting on a tree. And they say, okay, well, because that's there, we know that means we're allowed to keep telling you this stuff. And as soon as it flies away, they say, that's it. That's all we can tell you.
Amazing.
So it's like you've got all the insight you could need into what's going on and who you are. It's written on the world around you.
Amazing.
Number 4, scientific fact number 4 about heaven. Love is a force that draws like-minded people together. This is from Heaven and Hell 552. There is a complete sharing of affections and consequent thoughts in the spiritual world. So spirits move spontaneously toward kindred spirits because they are motivated by what attracts and delights them. In fact, they actually turn in that direction because that is how they breathe in their life or draw their breath freely, and not when they turn elsewhere. We need to realize that in the spiritual world, communication depends on which way we face. That the people in front of us are always the ones who are in a love like our own. This applies no matter which way we turn our bodies. Again, there's a lot of facts in a row.
Yes, a lot. And just that last point is quite mind-boggling. And he says, look, that's hard to understand in physical terms, that you could have four people who are all, facing each other, and yet every one of them has the Lord right in front of them.
Complex world building. If you're going to write like a fantasy novel, we got to kind of, okay, well, how does magic work, and how does this? And he's got this really complex world, which I think indicates that he didn't make it up, because I think it's too self-consistent. It's
the way physics works in that world, and the way, that's right.
So I said before, it's an inside-out world.
Yes.
So much so that the dominant force there, I'll show my ignorance of how physics actually works, but I think gravity is like the main thing in physics. Well, it does a lot. Like, according to our understanding, why everything is the way it is, why the planets orbit the sun, why we're staying down here. It's because gravity. Gravity pulls things together, and that's what. There, it's affinity. It's love that plays that role. Literally, what you love pulls you toward people who are like you, and even he's saying here, even turn you toward certain people.
And as you turn, your communication abilities, doesn't he say sometimes that if several people are together and having a conversation, and then somebody gets bored with the conversation, they get a sort of a vague look, and then they might actually disappear because they're just literally not into it. They're not enjoying the conversation anymore. Yeah. And so whoop, off they go. And we experience something like that in this world, where you can see somebody who will just suddenly say, "Oh, I was miles away, and I was tuned out," or I was somewhere else. People will say.
You can see that on this video. Like, we could see when people, a bunch of people tuned out at this part. That must have been a little too weird or a little too boring. This is people's tolerance for this, and the graph goes up and down.
So that is proof of what we're talking about.
I'm just saying, the more that does happen within the human mind. You absolutely can be in a room with someone, but you're checked out, and you're not really hearing what's said.
You're not with it. Yeah, you're not hearing.
You can be very much closer to someone who lives a couple thousand miles away from you than you are to the people in your neighborhood.
That's right.
Emotionally close, intellectually close. It does. The thing that Swedenborg is saying is that dynamic is already at play in us, because we're spiritual beings as well as physical beings.
And what happens after we die is that we're going to be with those people, with kindred spirits.
Right.
Which is a cool thought. From all over, from whenever and wherever, anybody who loves things in similar ways. Nobody's exactly the same in the whole universe, but those similarities, kinship, brings people together.
That's what creates communities of heaven on the other side. Okay, number 5. In heaven, there's no time and space. So you can never run out of time in heaven. You can never run out of room in heaven. This is from Heaven and Hell 163. In heaven, there are no years or days, but only changes of state. Where there are years and days, there are times. Where there are changes of state, there are states. So I don't know what it means yet, but instead of years and days, we've got changes of states. He goes on in Heaven and Hell 192. All motion in the spiritual world is the effect of changes of inner states, to the point that motion is nothing but change of state. This is how I have been led by the Lord into the heavens and also to planets in the universe. This has happened to my spirit while my body remained in the same place. This is how all angels move about, which means they do not have distances. And if they do not have distances, they do not have space. Instead, they have states and their changes.
Again, this is something we get a little taste of here, where I've been struck by, if you're going to someplace you've never been before, often for me, the journey there takes a lot longer than the return journey. On the return journey, I'm going home, and it gets more and more familiar, but on the way, I may be a little anxious about what's going to happen there, or, are we going to get there on time, or whatever it is. But it's the same journey. It takes roughly the same amount of time. And yet it feels completely different because of your state. And also that situation is amazing. It's almost as if in different states you have different thoughts or memories or something, because you can be in one state and then you say this, blah, 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 blah. And then a little while later, you're in a completely different condition. And somebody say, well, you just said, blah, blah, blah. I did? You know, it's hard to even remember because you were in such a different place in your head. You know, I think we know this at some level intuitively, but who has said it in this detailed way about the afterlife?